As I was looking for a fun subject to discuss with relatives, I found one that is sure to enliven family dinner. Abortion is murder, but it is okay to do it. Murder is defined by both Oxford and Cambridge dictionaries as the crime of intentionally killing a person. A fetus is a person, therefore abortion is murder. Murder, being the killing of a person, is a principle of this logical reasoning. It's something we all agree on by definition. On the flip side, a fetus being a person is an assumption and a lot more muddy of an issue. Another assumption is that life is valuable, but that's a philosophical discussion for another time. When it comes to the personhood of a fetus, and thus the factuality of abortion being murder, it wouldn't hurt to test the waters of lawmaking. The Unborn Victims of Violence Act of 2004, or Lacey and Connors Law, states the protection of unborn children. Whoever causes the death of or bodily injury to a child who is in utero at the time the conduct takes place is guilty of a separate offense. The punishment for that separate offense is the same as the punishment provided under federal law for that conduct had that injury or death occurred to the unborn child's mother. And it doesn't matter if the assailant has knowledge of the pregnancy, it is as if he or she committed murder or attempted murder upon any other human. The law defines the term child in utero as a member of the species Homo sapiens at any stage of development who is carried in the womb. However, the law contains a provision accepting abortion, stating that the bill would not be construed to permit the prosecution of any person for conduct relating to an abortion for which the consent of the pregnant woman or a person authorized by law to act on her behalf has been given, of any person for any medical treatment of the pregnant woman or her unborn child, or of any woman with respect to her unborn child. To give you a different perspective, as you may know, I'm from Argentina. On 29th of July 2010, 33 years old pregnant Carolina Píparo walked into a bank, in which shortly thereafter a robbery will take place. A bullet entered her womb, hitting her unborn child. Local justice condemned the robbers for, among other things, homicide. Such condemning has found echoes throughout the world. Therefore, killing someone else's fetus by law is murder. Then, what about one's own fetus? Consulting law would yield, given the intricacy of the subject, many an opposing answer. It will not be an argumentative excess to consult our moral intuitions, on which the laws of a society are often founded. British-born New Zealand moral philosopher Rosalind Hertzhaus states that even the most dedicated proponents of the view that deliberate abortion is just like an appendectomy or haircut rarely hold the same view of spontaneous abortion, that is, miscarriage. By dedicated proponents, she might mean those folks who refer to an early-stage fetus as merely a clump of cells. Ridding oneself of it would be, as Ms. Hertzhaus says, no different than getting a haircut or an appendix removal. Or, as Louis C.K. puts it, taking a shit. If you were such a proponent, and somebody came to you with grief due to a miscarriage, rather than to empathize with them, it would be more in line with your thought to consider they were exaggerating. Except you wouldn't, because no decent person would do that. Hertzhaus's comment comes from her essay Virtue Theory and Abortion, published during the summer of 1991 in Philosophy and Public Affairs. Virtue theory begins specifically with Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and Professor Hertzhaus resorts to it to expand the discussion on abortion. Aristotle's thought in general, then, might prove an interesting tool in probing these grounds. The Stagirite philosopher considers change in this world as the transition from potency to act, the quicker example of which is the fact that we, living people, are potential corpses until we become actual corpses at death. Thus, it might be useful to think of fetuses in terms of life in potency and life in act, as it follows. At conception, both something happens and something will happen. A life has begun to form now and will exist in the future. At the same time, there is a change in the present and in the future. As a woman, whether you take action or not, you will either give birth to a child or interrupt its development. Abortion is, so says the law of cause and effect, the termination of the fetus's life as it is and as it will be. And what do you call the termination of life? Even so, I think it necessary to further argue that a fetus is a person and that therefore abortion is murder. We can split the question in two issues. When can a fetus feel pain, and when is a fetus conscious? With regard to the first issue, up until the 1980s, doctors believed that newborns couldn't feel pain on account of their underdeveloped brains. But people also believed that blowing cigarette smoke into babies' faces was okay back then. I mean, I was born in 1994 and people did it to me. Anyways, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, and the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have researched and proposed the following. The cortex, the outer layer of the brain thought to be largely responsible for consciousness, and the thalamus, which relays sensory information like pain to the cortex, develop after 24 weeks. The nerve connections that allow a fetus to tell the difference between a harmless touch and a pinch don't develop until the third trimester. That a fetus under 28 weeks responds to unpleasant stimuli, it's a reflex or hormonal reaction, not proof of pain. Thus, painkillers during fetal surgery serve to prevent such reflexes. The present position of agreement is that a fetus is incapable of feeling pain until 24-25 weeks of development. Unluckily, most abortions happen before such moment. However, babies as premature as 22-23 weeks old can, given adequate medical care, survive outside the womb and, contrary to what doctors used to believe, feel pain. That is because it is not clear whether a fetus needs a cortex in the first place to feel pain. Pain receptors begin development in week 7 in the thalamus and are linked to the brain in weeks 12 to 15. Nevertheless, a fetus having the brain structures necessary to process pain doesn't translate to pain itself, for these connections might exist but not necessarily work yet. Thus unresolved, one issue leaves us with the need to move on to the next one. With regard to the second issue, Swiss pediatrician Hugo Lagerkrantz proposes that the acquiring of consciousness is not an on-off switch, but rather a gradual phenomenon. A fetus shows signs of consciousness after 24 weeks of gestation. Although it is asleep and unaware for the most part, given nerves from the visual and auditory areas are yet to be connected with the place of consciousness in the cortex. But building of the brain in general, and its neural correlate of consciousness in particular, begins 14 days after conception, being this the moment the mind is linked to the fetus. Such is the moral limit established by ethicist Lady Mary Warnock upon embryo research. After this point, you would be experimenting on a fellow human being. This is also the time frame when most women realize they are pregnant. Given you cannot abort a fetus you are unaware of, and that by the time you realize its existence, it has already started to become conscious, what all motherhood rejectors commit upon their unborn spawn is in utero assassination. But it is okay to do it. On this matter, we can consult the law again. A person is exempt from murder charges under condition of self-defense. In the UK, you can use reasonable force to protect yourself or others if a crime is taking place inside your home, and even chase and capture the intruder outside of it. In France, The attack on oneself must be unjustified. The defense has to be made for oneself or another person. The defense must be immediate, necessary for protection, meaning it is the only solution possible, and proportional to the attack. In America, you can defend yourself against an attacker using reasonable force, which includes deadly force, inside the home or even outside in any place you have the right to be. Other countries as well, including my native one, contemplate self-defense as a lawful condition to avoid charges of murder. And we should, once again, consult our moral intuitions to make sure. A home is not just property, it's a person's intimate habitat. Are an empty house and a home full of people the same thing? If murder is justified under law and morally so, if you ask most folks, when it comes to a home intruder, how much more justified it is when the intrusion is of one's own body? Abortion is a proportional measure of self-defense. The solution to an intrusion of one's body is the removal of the intruder. In the words of Louis C.K.,
"It's in her pussy. If there's a dude in your pussy, you get to kill him." I think that's pretty fundamental. You're allowed to kill people if they're in your house.
and if somebody argues that pregnancy is brought about by one's own actions, I respond, so is a home intrusion. By the action of me buying nice shit someone else might try to steal. With that, I wish you a happy family dinner. I'm sure I will have it.